Yes.
All right, welcome back. We are MDEV1004, Mobile APIs and Frameworks, in the summer 2024 semester at Georgia, and it's week 8, part 1 of our broadcast and recording together. And this week is going to be different than other weeks because we have the user interface this week that we're going to be doing. And we're going to probably start with iOS and finish with Android. So we'll do both. Which is going to be a little different than for people because I know we've been focusing on our API, and that's fine. It's kind of done, that part, and now we're just moving on to the next pieces. So other things we want to talk about is assignment 3, and I want to talk about that now before we get moving on to everything else. So let's do assignment 3. So assignment 3 is taking your taking your API that you already have. So you're going to create a third version of your Express API that includes JWT. Now we have that already. I've given it to you in your in-class exercises. You just need to include it in your assignment. I know many of you already have, which is good. And but the only thing we want you to do is read your data. So fetch the data from your API and display it in either iOS or Android. Just display. So I'm not doing full CRUD. Just read functionality. And that's what's due July 21st. So again, we're going step by step for this example, so it shouldn't be that difficult. Again, we're going to use the same database as assignment 1, same 20 favorite movies, all that kind of stuff, is going to be the same. The things that we want to fetch, and this is something that we're going to be talking about today, is movie title, movie studio, and movie rating. I'll also be going on next week and do more. I'll do more, full CRUD starting next week with both. And then we'll get into authentication the week after that and how to add authentication and all those kind of pieces. So that's kind of what's happening. And this is not unfamiliar. I think you guys have seen this thing before. So your Express API, you get 5 marks. And this is the same one that you're going to use for, TypeScript, the one that you used before from assignment 1 and 2. I'm giving you 5 marks so that it's working correctly. There's no errors. It's not going to crap out when I'm using it or something like that. MongoDB, same thing. Giving you 5 marks for just doing the same thing as before. So 10 marks like free right now. And then same thing on another 5 marks, which are free because I kind of see these marks as free is because more or less you've already done this work. I'm just making sure that if you're starting off and let's suppose you missed for whatever reason assignment 1 or 2 or something goes wrong with any of these things, this is where you might lose some marks. But for the most part, all of this part right here is stuff that you've already done, these 3 pieces. And then your Express API will include JWT authentication components, but you do not require token-based authentication to be functional in UI, but you should demonstrate this using Postman. So one thing that you guys may have not done, some of you did it already, in your assignment 1 and 2 is demonstrate JWT working. So that's just separate from everything else. Like demonstrate that it works. I can log in, I can log out. I can actually have JWT protect routes, right? So remember, I have full functionality right now. You have full CRUD in your API. Show me that you can do that with JWT. You kind of did it already with assignment or in-class exercise. I'm just looking for it to be implemented into your assignment, like into your project here. And then and that's worth 20 marks. I mean, like these are, for me, again, these are like 20 free marks. Like it's like you guys have done this before in your in-class exercise. So it's not a problem. Now, this is where things change and you're getting, for 20 marks again, you're going to create one screen, only one, in some kind of table view or other UI element like a recycler view in Android, depending on which platform you choose to use, whether it's Android or iOS, totally up to you, whatever you feel comfortable with. And you're going to just fetch your movies. Each row should display the movie title, movie studio, and movie rating. We're going to do that actually today. So, I mean, you'll have most of everything you need for your example after today. Each row should be appropriately spaced out and use something like a custom table view cell on the Android side. It's called a view holder that you're going to be using. But for the most part, that's what you're going to do. And then your apps code should asynchronously fetch the data. So one part is your user interface, and the other part is you fetching data. And again, there's different ways of doing it on both platforms. We'll talk about both ways today. And then the same thing goes for the stuff you've already done. Internal documentation. Some people lost marks for that on your assignment and on your midterm tests. I've marked all those things for most people. And some people, for whatever reason, keep on forgetting to put in internal documentation. That's 5 marks out of your assignment that people lose. It doesn't seem like a lot, but it adds up over time. And the other one is I've marked 3 things now as mandatory. The first thing is your GitHub repositories, multiple repositories, because you need a repository for your app, and you need a repository for, there's actually 3 if you think about it, right? There's a repository for your app, there's a repository for your live site, the one that's going up on GitHub. There's a repository for your staging, all that stuff that you're doing locally, right? You have like multiple repositories now, chances are. All of those things are mandatory. You have to be able to have those available to me. So, so show me your repository for your app, because I need to download the app, test it out, make sure that it works properly, like you say, all that kind of stuff. Same thing with, your repository for, for your API, that also has to be there. So again, if I want to download it and inspect it and see what you did, anything different, for the most part, it shouldn't change much. Your API is just going to include JWT, and that's just basically porting it over from one of your in-class exercises. So that's not a problem, but this is definitely mandatory. Any GitHub repositories you need to have, all right? The other one is, and this is new, you must give me your cloud server API, kind of link. Some people didn't do this, and they tested locally, okay? So, if you don't give me the link for your cloud server, you're going to lose 5 marks. I mean, that's just the way it is. If you only test, locally and don't, kind of test remotely, and you don't show that in your video, again, you're going to lose marks for that. People have lost marks for not showing demonstrating stuff, both locally and remotely. That's something you need to do. In this case, you only need to do it for JWT, right? So, it's a little bit longer than before, because you have to use Postman for JWT to log in and register and all that stuff like normal in your assignment, not your in-class exercise. So this is kind of another thing you've already done. Just asking you to do it again for your assignment to make sure that it's working properly. It's all it is testing. You're just demonstrating that you can test and everything's working. And then of course, without this, I can't access it and test it out myself. So that's what I want to do. The next part is your YouTube. Of course, that is mandatory. And some people still have very low sound. Some of your YouTube videos have low sound. Some of your YouTube videos are very fuzzy. Like you've submitted videos and the background is fuzzy. I can't hardly see the code. Please, before you submit your video, if I can't hear you and I can't see the code, I can't really evaluate you. And you may have gotten a response like, I can't evaluate this because it's too fuzzy, or I can't evaluate this because I can't see hear your voice. You have to demonstrate your stuff, talk about it, especially when you're demonstrating your app's functionality. Like, you've got 2 parts to this. Like, you've got your app and you've got your API. You need to demonstrate both of those 2 things now, right? So it's even more critical that your video is working properly. Okay, so this is your assignment 3. I don't think it's that difficult. Again, it builds upon assignment 1 and 2, and it's worth 7.5% of your final grade. Okay, so that's something we've been building. It's kind of like an ongoing project we've been building in addition to all of our homework every week, which is continuing with this week with in-class exercise 7. Okay. Hopefully you guys don't have any questions on this one. Sudarshan, you okay with this? No problems?
Yes, Professor.
Okay, great. Okay, and I'm just going to close this off. So that is your information about assignment 3. I'm going to continue with this video instead of, kind of stopping it and starting it again, and then we'll move on to the stuff that we're doing in the next part. So the next thing we want to talk about after we've talked about assignment 3 is our schedule, which is slightly changed, but not much. Again, we're creating a UI for API. Today, we're doing iOS and Android examples. Next week, we're adding authentication views, and we're also doing more CRUD operations. We're doing that, reactivating JW2 if you can, and then we're getting right into payment gateways and with Stripe and PayPal and all that stuff starting week 10, and all those kind of things. We'll also talk about other deployment options as we go, and again, some of this may change the order. I might move things around a little bit, but for the most part, this is what we're doing. Assignment 3, again, is due week 10. Assignment 4 is going to be due week 13. And then you have your final test, which builds upon everything you've done. You've already done a midterm test. The final test will be very similar. You'll have just more information, more stuff that you're going to practice. Some of you did fairly well on the midterm test, I have to say, like, really, really well. Some people didn't do so well. And the people that didn't do so well are the people who just didn't follow instructions. Otherwise, I mean, like, it wasn't like that difficult, to do. So please follow the instructions on both the assignments and the tests, and then you'll be fine. Okay, I think for the most part, I think everyone is trending very well in this course. I don't think that anyone is, in general, is having a lot of problems. So just keep doing what you're doing, guys. I'm very proud of you guys. This semester, you guys got a great cohort, really good group of people that I'm seeing. And again, my message to you is you're doing a good job. Keep doing what you're doing. I think it's fairly straightforward. Most of you are demonstrating your videos very well, and you show understanding. At least you're talking about it, that kind of stuff. And so it's going through your mind. How do you create this back end, API for Android and iOS, or even if you wanted to use some kind of hybrid technology like Flutter or React Native? That's what this course is all about, really, how to do that. So that is a little bit of housekeeping about what we're doing. And now let's move into what we're doing today. So again, why does this say this? This is incorrect. This is totally incorrect. I don't know why. I mess up. I have to mess up. So it's actually I7. Did I open the wrong thing? I did not. I7 is due week 8. That's what it is. And it's Sunday, July 9th. And it should say 2024. And it's Sunday, July 9th is incorrect. Wow, I messed up. Totally messed up this one. Because if you think about it, today is the 4th. For those people who celebrate in the States, enjoy your 4th. And then there is the 5th tomorrow, 6th. So it's really the 7th. So this is July 7th. Wow, I can't believe I missed that. And of course, we're not doing this. What we're doing is we're building upon, that's why I'm looking at this thing. We're building on stuff. So we're creating user interfaces. Wow, I don't know how I missed this. For best laid plans, for iOS and Android. Right? And what we want those interfaces to do is we want to fetch data from the Express API and display it in one screen. And for Android, it's called an activity. Okay, so that's what it is. We're going to be using, for iOS, we're going to be using Swift and Storyboard. We're not going to use Swift UI. And for Android, we're going to be using views. So a view template, not compose. All right, so that way it's going to be pretty simple in terms of the way we do things. I will be using view binding for Android because that is the way to go, not synthetic binding. But for the most part, that is JWT components. What we will do is remove them temporarily from our API. And I mean, when I remove, I mean comment out. That's what I really mean. So we're going to comment them out. Comment out. Right, that's what we're doing. And the reason why we want to do that is because we don't have security. When I want to be able to read stuff and not have any issues, so I'm just going to comment that stuff out. And so everything works pretty good. And then we'll put it back in. All right, that's what we're going to be doing. All right, so that is the structure. We've already talked about assignment 3, yay. And let's move on. All right, so let's talk about fetching API data with iOS. Yay, this is the first time we're talking about iOS. And I talked about this before with you guys that I would be doing both iOS and Android examples. Today, we're going to start off with iOS. And let's talk about this. So in order for us to do fetching, which is interesting, we're going to be using something called a completion closure. Now, this is an advanced topic in iOS, I have to say. And the reason for that is because it goes beyond just the regular stuff that you guys have done. So if you haven't had a chance to explore more advanced Swift with iOS, hopefully this semester, which is your second semester, you've had a chance to explore some more stuff. and maybe you ran across a completion closure, maybe you haven't. But what it really does is it's like a callback, and it has a funny syntax that we want to look at. And what it does is it allows us to, to fetch data with non-blocking execution, so almost like asynchronously, which is what we want to do. Okay. So how does it look? It kind of looks weird, right? So here's the function itself. So if we're going to make a function, right, as an example, I'm going to show you the code first, and I'm showing it to you so that way we can review it together. So let's move in. So if you notice, like the fetch movies function, we're going to have a completion, and the completion itself, notice what it is it is a callback function, right? So you can see here we're expecting a callback function that we're going to receive. So that is the thing that we want. To fetch movies, we're going to pass a callback function that we're going to use to this fetch movies method, right? And then we're going to basically call whatever the API is. So for example, if our API was api.example.com/movies, then that would be the thing that we put in there. That's the base URL, if you will. And then what we do is with this one, we have the completion, and we pass to the completion closure nil, which means we handle our URL error, right? That's how it goes. We also create something called a URL session, and we create a shared data task. And that shared data task allows us to take in two parts: the data itself that we want to handle, and this with this URL, of course, with the base URL. And what we want to do is look at that data and any error, as an example. And if we have an error, right, then we handle the network error. We kind of output that here. There's a network error, and otherwise, if there's no error, we wouldn't return. If we have an error, we're going to just kind of crap out and say there's an error, right? If there's no error, we're just going to take the data itself and then handle. Let's suppose if the error is empty, we kind of respond like this is empty, kind of thing. However, if we don't get an error, kind of an error that is a data that is completely empty, then what we want to do is we want to do in a do catch. We kind of let movies itself, and if you look what movies would be, movies are going to be a collection of movies that we're going to read using something called JSON decoder, where we're going to decode every movie as an example, and then pass the movies back out to the completion itself, the completion closure. Okay, so every time we see completion, we're actually passing this back out to the callback function. That's what it does. So here, all we're doing is we're fetching the movies asynchronously and passing them back out to the callback function, if in case that is the way it's going to go. So notice the completion itself have two parts: a movie and error. And notice that in this case, movies is what we're going to pass out. Nil means there's no error, or there's no error. And then here would be there's no movie, but there is an error, and there's some kind of problem with kind of decoding the JSON. Maybe, and here's something that might happen: we are decoding the JSON, but it's in the wrong format. A lot of times we get a formatting error because in the API, what ends up happening is if you haven't formatted it properly, let's say for your API, and let me just take a look at this as well with you. If I look at our previous code, so this in-class exercise 6, I'm going to make a copy of this right now. And this is for in-class exercise 6 that we're going to copy to in-class exercise 7. Really, if you think about this, we're going to have 3 files today, right? We're going to have in-class exercise 7, which is the API, in-class exercise 7b, which is going to be your iOS, and in-class exercise 7c, which is going to be your Android. All right, so 3 little files that are going to be every single time we do an in-class exercise now, because there's so much to do. Okay, there's so much to do. So let's make a copy of this one. This is our API so far. So we're going to copy this, paste it, and it includes all the node modules here. That's why it's taking so long. But please do this part of your in-class exercise 7. Okay, it's taking a sweet little time. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create in-class exercise, 7b and 7c. We're going to do that mostly on IO and on the Mac. Okay, we're going to get to that in a second. First, I'm going to create this, push to GitHub, and then we'll pull it in on the Mac, and you'll see how this is going to work. Okay? Because right now I'm still on my PC. That's taking enough time trying to copy all of those. These are just all, if you notice, the modules, module data that we're getting from in-class exercise 6. Okay. So once this is done, we'll repackage everything, and then I'll show you in in-class exercise 7 what this looks like. So let's rename this, and we'll call this time in-class exercise 7, and we'll say API, so that we can classify this as the API version, the API component of in-class exercise 7. So it'll be 3 parts, okay? Let's take a look at this. So I'm kind of opening up Visual Studio Code here, and what I want to do is I want to drag and drop our API in here. And here's our API. So it has everything that we had last time, right? So you can see that we have all the modules. That's what took a long time. And what we also have is our routes. Here's our routes. And here you can see that this is for a route for register, login, and log out. And there also is a route for movies. This is how we left it last time. What we want to do, first step in our process, is comment out our JWT components, just in case we want to practice adding, updating, and deleting next week. So I want to do it now. So I kind of would just comment out these pieces. And that way there's no issues. Okay. Let's just do that first. And again, we don't really have to do it this week because we're not going to do full CRUD, but we will get to it. And I want to make sure that next week when we get together, none of this is protected, so we can come in and do what we have to do and then protect it afterwards. Okay, so there we go. So that's the first step. We want to definitely, when we're in here, we want to TSC -W, which is we want to do in watch mode. We want to recompile everything as normal, like we normally do. Again, we have some other problems with types and passport local mongoose. Nothing to do with us. We just ignore that. We do want to also test it locally, so I'm going to use NodeMon to test locally here. So you can see we should be able to connect to our MongoDB database, right? And so this is kind of the first and only change we're going to make to our in-class exercise 7 API. Okay, so we're good. We're connected. But one thing I wanted to mention was that in our controllers, this is one thing I wanted to show you. In movies, notice that we have a structure for our responses. The structure we agreed on was success, message, data, and token. Success, message, data, and token. If I provide only success and message but not data, then if I go back to what I was talking about on the PowerPoint, we may get some weird thing that says JSON is not in the correct format. Okay, so that's what might happen here when we have an error that comes back. So that is the simple snippet that is for the completion closure, right? The next part is when we fetch movies, again, what I've done here is I've gone into detail. I'm not going to read this. This is for you, right? But basically what it does, it talks about how everything works. And I kind of put it in here for your records, for your reference, just in case you wanted to kind of read about what each piece does. If you don't understand each of these pieces, I've kind of put it in here for you so you can understand it, okay? Let's move on. So this is new. So when I make a call, I want to call the fetch movies function. We don't normally do, normally what you would expect is to do something like this, where we use brackets, right? Or parentheses. We don't use this structure, the syntax anymore, when we're, passing in a, making use of the callback function. This here itself, if you think about it, this whole thing is the callback function, and it's like an anonymous function. So instead of using brackets, we're passing this, the body of this function call, right, there's 2 parts, right? There's movies and there's error. Those are the 2 parts, because remember, going back to here, that's what we're expecting. We're expecting a collection of movies, right, an array of movies, and an error if we have any. That's what we're expecting, right? And so we pass back out, if we have an error or movies, we pass it back out to the callback function, which is over here. So let's suppose we pass movies, right, to the callback function. If we have if movies exists, right, as an example. And if it's not empty, so that's in here, then we can assign movies, which is our movies object here that's local to this function, to the movies object that we get in from the callback, right? So again, this is coming from that function to here. That's what it's going. That's what it's doing, right? So, and we arrange it, and then what we're going to do is the table view, which is something we have to set up in our movie view controller, which we're going to do in a second or in a bit, is we're going to reload data, and we're going to reload data with the movies that we have in. Okay, that's what's going to happen here. So that is our fetch movies. And then that's if we have movies that are not empty. But if the movies are empty, if we didn't get anything, we're going to kind of output a message, and we're going to have a little display error message function that's going to help us, a utility function that's going to display a message that says, hey, man, no movies are available. That's what's going to happen. Okay, what about if there's other errors? If there's an error, right? That means if this error exists. So there's two parts. Actually, there's different possibilities. I have no movies, right? So no movies here, right? And there's an error. I have movies and there's an error. I have movies and there's no error. Okay. So hopefully we're not going to have any movies, any error here. Like if there's no error at all, then we can skip all this part. But otherwise, there's a couple of ways, a couple of different things that can happen. If there's an error and the error is a URL error, and we might say request timed out. This is possible for us because remember, our API is hosted on render, and render spins down, right? So because render spins down, there might be a long, if you ran this without getting render to spin up, you might get an error temporarily, right? And that's because you're going to time out, okay? Other errors would be things like wrong structure, or whatever. This is what this is going to do. So this structure here is really the syntax for our call to the fetch movies function. Okay, so we're going to use this too. And then I talk about here how it works and in detail about how everything works. So this is our display error message function. And what it's going to do for us is going to pop up a little alert that's going to basically say, hey, this is what happened. It's not working and whatever. So a little pop-up message that comes up. So that is this, right? And that is really the nuts and bolts of our iOS application. So going back to, to here, we have this, right? We've disabled our structure. We've disabled it. And because basically in our routes, we just basically said, I don't want to use any protection for them right now. All we really need here is, to display the movie list. We want to do this. So remember, there's two routes. One of them is / and one of them is /list. And if we do something like API/list, I want to be able to display all the movies in a table in iOS and all the movies in a table on Android. That's what I want. Okay, it's going to take a little bit of work, but that's what we want. So now that we know this works, I'm going to put this up on GitHub. Right, so git commit -n, we'll say added project files for in-class exercise 7 API. That's what we kind of did. And I'm going to push this to GitHub. There we go. I also want to push the changes to render. Let's do that now so that we don't forget. So again, I'm going to go here. Remember that we also have an API that we replace stuff with. So I can kind of take all of my files. I'm just going to close this down for a second, right? And I'm going to go into in-class exercise API, grab all this, copy it, go over to here, right? Don't delete the Git folder, just delete all of this, right? There we are. And then just paste that stuff here, right? The stuff we just got from our API. So from i7 API to API, and then what we're going to do is we're going to push this to render, and so that everything is going to work out okay. The first thing we do is some minor changes. Again, all I'm doing is removing stuff from this. The other thing that you have to consider is if you've marked any of your components as required, Android and iOS isn't going to like that if something isn't there. So for example, if I'm going to add something, and I'm going to add something to Android through Android or iOS, I add a movie and I don't provide all the details. For example, I don't provide the not just the API, the title and the studio and the rating, but I also don't provide the directors, the writers, the actors. I don't provide all those things. And you marked all those as required, it's going to fail, right? So something to note. Okay, so here I've kind of copied all this over into this, and again, I'm going to go back to my Visual Studio Code. I'm just going to drop this stuff, my API, into Visual Studio Code. So we're looking at the right thing here. And there it is. One thing I'd like to change is this is 7, and this is, instead of in class exercise 7, it is our API. So we're going to say that MDEV M2024 API version 7, because that's what we're doing. I didn't do that for in class exercise 7. That's okay. You guys can do that. And then once I've done that's the only change I'm making. For the most part, it's ready to be put up on render. So now I'm just going to go here, git add dot, git commit -m. We'll say updated version of API, and we'll say prep for UI is what we're doing. We're prepping for the UI. We're going to get push that, and that's going to push that up to render. Let's see how that works. So I'm just going to go into render.com now and check that out. Here's my dashboard, and let's log in. And we're going to see that it's deploying right now. This is the stuff, our web service that we've kind of created. Let's take a look at how it's going to deploy and if there are any issues. We want to make sure that this is working before we go into the on the iOS side, because that would be terrible. It's not working, and we're assuming that it works, but it doesn't work. Bad things, right? And then you can see that this is working okay. And let's see if it's going to be live. And when it is, we can move on to the next piece. So, okay. All right. So it's getting there. Build successful. There we go. So it's starting. And what I'm looking for is your site is live. Once I hear your site is live, right, then we're good to go. Well, we're actually connected to Mongo. So, I mean, right there, the site is live. But, you know, it's good to wait. There it is. Your service is live. That's good. And then I can test it. So that's the thing. So this is the thing that we're going to have to put in. So we know that API isn't enough. That doesn't do anything. It has to be API/list. And that should give us a list of movies. And even that, let's take that further, API/movie/list, right? Which is, remember, we can have books, we can have movies, we can have whatever in our media library. And here we're going to show off some of our movies. We don't have a lot here. We have 4. And this is good because we're going to add some eventually with our example. So this is good. We're able to read our the data from our API. And you can see the structure of our data. It has a message. It has data, as an example. And then at the end, you're going to see a token, which is null. Okay, message data token. And success message data token is what it is, right? So that's our structure. And we're good to go. Okay, so that is what it's going to be there. I'm going to keep this open. So we're going to come back to this. And I don't think I need this part. This is render, so I'm going to close that down just for now. All right, and let's get back to what we were doing. So that is everything you need for the first part of your in-class exercise 7. Fix up, your application. Make a copy of it so that we know we're working with the most recent copy of our API. Don't leave it with in-class exercise 6 because we just modified it a little bit, and we're going to continue to modify it as we go if we need to. So that is this part. Now, what I want to do is shift gears and go into my. Let's travel into my. Mac Studio. There we go. So this is the first time we're using our Mac. So now the requirement is you need a Mac for this. So if you don't have a Mac for this, you can't do this part. All right. So here it is. I'm just going to log in. Okay. And just put this aside. And let's start off with VS Code. I want to pull my latest build here. And so again, if we look at Georgian, we can see that we have some ICEs and we only have 1, 2, 3, you know, as an example. I want to be able to pull all these ICEs in. So again, what I want to do is kind of go to, we can use a terminal like this, so CD space, and grab this one and just pull it in. There we go. And we're just going to do a git pull, right? How about this? We're going to go into, do we not have a thing? M23 May, I think so. What do we do here? LS ISIS. Yeah, I don't even think I have. Well, that's okay. We can make it ICE 1, 2, 3. Yeah, so let's not do this then. If that's true, let's just kill the terminal for a second. And let's just kill this part. There we go. I'm just going to move this to trash. And we'll just make it so that we pull everything. I'll just pull everything in. Just actually even easier. So I'm going to go back to this folder. And we'll go into, yeah, we'll go into here, right? So I'll pull in, so we'll say CD space, and we'll say Georgian. There we go. And then in here, I will go and pull that in. So we'll go into GitHub, Georgian College. And what I want to do is, here's the ICEs for Georgian College. There we go. So this is the thing we just did. I'm just going to pull that in. There we go. And go back to my Mac. And I can do something like git clone. And then maybe we can right click and paste that link. And then we'll git clone all those things here. And we should be able to see them in here now. There we go. So these are all the stuff we just did, and we cloned it so we can continue working. Just in case we have to work fully on the Mac, I can do that. I'm just going to go into full screen mode here, just that we just fully work on the Mac here, so we just look like it's a Mac. There we go. And okay, so this is where we're at, and you can see that we're good. Let's open that up in Visual Studio Code. So I'm just going to grab our ICE7 API just to be able to see it. So just in case we need it, it's right here. Okay, so we can see that all that stuff is here. The only thing we have to change in this case is our package.json, which should be, I'm going to change it now, ICE7 and version 7. There we go. And just like we've done in the past, I'm just going to pull this in and just do a git add dots, git commit -m, and I'll say changed version in package.json. And then we're going to, we didn't save. Hold on a second. We didn't save. Now we'll do that same thing. Git add dot, and then we'll do a git push. Okay, and that'll push our latest changes to GitHub. And if anything we have to do here, we have Visual Studio Code available to us to do any of the changes we need to do if we need Visual Studio Code. I'm just going to close this down because I don't need it, but we have all of our files right here. In case we need to look at them or whatever, they're there. The next part we want to do is kind of start off a brand new project using Xcode. So here's Xcode, and I'm going to create a new project in Xcode. So there we go. I'm going to make an app, right? Click next. And so here, the product name, you want to, I mean, you can see that my organizational identifier is CA.Georgian College, and I'm going to make this ICE7-iOS, so we know which one it is, right? And so this is the iOS version of ICE7, right? And it's going to be storyboard in Swift. We're not going to be using Swift UI because that's kind of an advanced topic for you guys, right? And then, well, I'm not sure if you guys have even covered it yet. Hopefully you've covered it. Let's continue and click next, right? It's going to ask me, where do I want to put this? Well, I want to put this in Georgian and to, okay, that's not where I wanted to put it. I wanted to kind of navigate dices. But let's just close this down for a second and just do that again. So if it went into Georgian, and here it is, I just want to pull this into here. That's all I meant to do. Okay, so there we are. So it's pulled in here. And let's open that back up. So it's going to obviously fail, but that's okay. And by the way, you can always, if you can't find it, if you say show in Finder and it can't, you know, as an example, then it will have a problem. But you can see that here it actually worked. It actually found it in Finder. which is really great. So I'm going to open that up now. And which is good. It was able to track the changes that I made. All right, good. So we have this, and like we want to do right now, our target is an iPhone 15 Pro, right? That's fine. We can also target an iPhone 15 Pro Max. That would be our target. You want to make a large display just to be similar to what we're going to do on Android. And for the most part, in terms of support and supported devices, you can see that this is our little manifest and what it supports. 17.4 is what I'm using. I haven't updated to the latest version. I know that the latest version has other versions, but it's okay. This is just an example anyway. And then, do I want to support landscape left or landscape right? I'm just going to uncheck those. I don't want to support those things on the iPhone. And iPad orientation, again, it'd be the same thing if you're going to use an iPad. You know, if you have iPad support, you know, as an example, I definitely don't care about this, and definitely not upside down mode, right? So those things are good. We've just kind of configured our our version. You can also remove stuff. Like, for example, if I don't want to support Apple Vision Pro, then I can remove that. I can remove Mac, and I can remove iPad, and that'll take away the stuff that is not related to iPhone. So only iPhone is what I'm supporting right now. Okay, so that's there. It comes with a view controller, and this is review for you guys, right? With information about how to launch stuff. Main storyboard, remember, it comes with one kind of view. That's all it comes with. And when we launch this thing, so if I was to launch this thing, let's just run it. And we should the first time. And the reason why we want to launch it is because this way it creates our the proper simulator for us, you know, as an example. And it should launch one day. Let's see what the simulator, here's the simulator opening right now. And this is the iPhone 15 Pro Max. There we have. So make it a little smaller for us. Put it over here. All right. And you can see it launched and there's no problems. Okay, so that's what we want. So that's kind of the first thing. I always try to start this off to make sure that it's good. And if I stop it, and if I go back to my simulator, here it is, you can see that it's ready to go. So that's i7 iOS. That's the one we're running it on an iPhone 15 Pro Max simulator. Awesome. So next steps, what we want to do is create an interface first. I always do the interface first before anything else. And remember, what we can do is we want to add in a couple things. And I want to make, if I kind of look at a table, there are two things in the table that we can add, right? This is just review for you guys, a table view and a table view cell. I'm just going to add a table. So here's our table. And I'm just going to zoom out here a little bit. What I want to do with this table, the table view itself, is I just want to, you know, kind of make it go wall to wall here. There we go. And the bottom, just in the safe area. And I don't want to take up the entire top. I want to leave some space here for a label that basically is going to say something like, you know, favorite movies, you know, whatever your favorite movies are going to be, right? So table views first. The other thing I want to add in inside the table view itself is a table view cell, right? So if I go table again, right, then you can see that table view cell is here. I want to take this table view cell and just drag and drop it onto the prototype area, which is going to create an area here for the prototype. So that's pretty simple, right? And on the left here, right? So this is our outliner, and we can see that there is just called the table view cell, but really this table view cell is our custom table view cell that we're going to be using. There's two parts to it. There's the container itself and the content view, and the content view is where we can actually add in our own custom, kind of components, right, in iOS, right? So next thing I want to add before we continue there is let's add a label. So again, I'll talk about a label. There we go. And then let's add that label up here. So kind of in the middle, which is pretty cool. I'm just going to zoom in here. And we will make this label. Let's pull in the side here. And we'll call this thing like favorite movies. So favorite movies. There we go. And let's make sure that this thing is centered. There we go. And let's make it bigger. One trick to keep it all centered and stuff is to kind of make it so that it's kind of a hack. From a constraint perspective, because of, when you're using regular Swift with storyboard, you need to add constraints. if you want to, do stuff. In our case, we're going to make a very simple interface, so you won't need constraints. But so I do this, and then it kind of like center it. And then maybe you want to make this so that it's slightly bigger instead of 17. Let's make it something like, I don't know, like 24. So quite big. And we can change it from a style of regular to bold, so it looks kind of nicer and stuff like that. So that is your favorite movies, and you get your prototype cells in there, right? Let's test. So first thing we do is we test it, and if everything goes well, we should always test it at regular. We have favorite movies, but there's nothing in here because this is where your favorite movies are going to appear. Okay, let's stop that. And so now the table view cell is interesting. If I click on table view cell on the right, you can see that the style by default is custom, which is what we want. But you can also choose other styles here, like for example, basic, right, which gives you a title, or right detail, which gives you something else, or subtitle, which gives you the title and detail here. So we can kind of use this if you really wanted to, but I want to make my own custom table view cell, so that's not really useful for us. Let's go back to custom. There it is. There's custom again. And in order for me to add stuff in here, I want to add 3 pieces of information like we said. We want to add in our title, our studio, and we want to add in our rating. Those are the 3. So let's add our rating in first. So, and there's a couple of ways we can do this. I can add in stuff like you might add a text view, right? So here's a text view or a text field. So if I was adding a text field, let's try that in, right? If I add it in, and I'm adding it into the content area here. So you can see that it goes into the content area. I only have these 2 little controls. I can't really control the height of the text field or anything else like that. And so that is kind of a problem. There's different options here. You can make it so plain or attributed. Attributed gives you kind of a little bit more functionality and that kind of stuff, but it doesn't really give us a lot of control. So that's one option. What about if I was adding in, instead of a text field, what if I added a text view? So let's add that text view in there. Well, text view is kind of weird. You can also add it, like, whether it's here or whatever. You can see that it does give me more control, a text view. It gives me all these control handles, but it also gives me a pile of stuff that's in here. And it's usually multi-line, right? So I could use this. I'm just going to erase this, right? You can see I can do that, right? And then I have a text view, and I can resize it. Oops, let's undo. I can resize it down to what I want. So let's just make sure that I do it properly. So let's make sure so it's like here, and I can resize it like this. I could use a text view. That's also an option. And I could use this, right? So not bad. I mean, that's something that I can control. I can make it so that whatever I want. And again, I'm creating my little custom table view cell so I can do whatever I want. Awesome. Well, that's something I could do. I'm not going to do that. I'm actually going to just use a label. I find that labels are just a lot easier to use and more control, right? And because we're only displaying stuff, not changing stuff, I'm not asking a user to enter data. I don't have to make it read-only. I don't have to do all those things. I mean, a label has all that. And if I just pass in a label again, you can see that I have full control over, what I'm looking at here. So let's move in. And again, I'll use this little mini map to kind of guide me so you can see the whole thing here. And let's move this label so that it's on the left. This is where it's going to start, here on the left. And I want to make it a little bigger, so kind of something that looks like this. And I want to put in here for the label itself. Let's label it. So if on the left in the outliner, I can double click here and name this label anything I want, right? So instead of like, kind of leaving it the way it is, I can kind of get in here and call this the rating label, because that's what it is, rating label, right? So rating label, and then what I can do, instead of putting label, I can use a value for the rating. Now, ratings are going to go from, let's say, I don't know, 0, hopefully not, to like a 10, right, for a movie. So let's say, in our case, our rating is going to be maybe a 10.0. That would be the best kind of thing that you can have, 10.0. This is okay to use, 10.0, but I'd like to use even bigger numbers, like 99.9, right? Maybe 99.99, because maybe someone wants to use a weird rating system where they actually do like 0.47, I don't know, for something, right? And if I did this, it gives me spacing, and you can see that this label that I have here is just not wide enough for 99.9, right? So I want to make it a little bit wider. There it is. So this 99.9, I've spaced it out. And then, of course, what I want to do is, now that I've made it a little wider, right, I can also center it. There it is. So this kind of, my label is centered there. Okay, so that's what it is. I also want to be able to color this label different colors And for now, let's use a base color of green that I want to use for a background color. And so let's say for the background, which is defaulted, let's use a color that is green, system green. So there's a system green color. White, I mean, black is okay as the color, right? And I want to change the color. I want to have red if it's 5 or below. I want to have yellow if it's like above five, but let's say below 7, something like that. And then between 7 and 10, I want to make it green. So I can kind of indicate if there's a good movie or kind of a movie that's kind of in the middle, or maybe a movie that is not so good. All right, so that's what I want to use. So I'm going to start with green and assume that all movies are great. Okay, and then we'll test out the movies later on, and we can maybe have movies that are not so great. Okay. So that's the first part of my prototype cell, is the label, which is the rating label. Okay, let's add another one. So let's add another label. And this one, I'm going to put a little bit higher up, and this one is going to be called the title label. So again, what you want to do is kind of click once and click again. And we want to kind of put in the title label. That's the title of the movie. And then we'll put in title. Here's an example of what it's going to look like, title. And then what we're also going to do is increase the size of this one, maybe to something like, I don't know, 18 points. Right? Make it bold. There we go. Okay, so title. That's the title of the movie. And then underneath that, what I want is another one that is going to be another label over here. And this label, I'm going to make it, just going to space it a little bit higher up just so it's closer. And this is going to be studio. All right, so this is studio. So again, we're going to click once and click again, which is going to be able to give us our studio label. Again, I'm labeling it here just so that it makes sense to me that this is going to work. And here, we're just going to put in studio, right? And on the bottom, we're just going to reduce this size to something like 16. Something 16, so it's a little bit smaller, title and studio. And if you think this is too big, studio is too big, because it would be like Paramount, or something like that, or Warner Brothers, or whatever it's going to be, the studio. You can also make this a little smaller. We'll test it and see how it looks. Okay, so those are the 3 pieces that we need for our prototype cell. What we need next, as an example, is a custom table view cell. We're going to call this the movie table view cell. That's what we're going to put in here. Okay, so we've got our user interface. Well, you know what? This would be a great place to put it up on GitHub. Now that we have our user interface, it's pretty simple. And we can test this. Again, it's not going to show up at all when we test it in our simulator, because it doesn't show this because there is no data, right? No data, we don't see anything here. But we're going to see here something here eventually, right? So, all right, so let's make that. So again, what I need is, going back to this, I've got a main, like a view controller, and I want to be able to create a custom table view cell in order for me to do that. Let's do this now. So I'm going to right click here. I'm going to add a new file. And in that new file, let's add in, it's going to be a Swift file, that's for sure. And we're going to click next. And the Swift file's name is going to be something like, the movie table view cell. There's a movie table view cell. And maybe movie table view cell is interesting because it's going to give us everything we need. I don't need any of this. I do need to import UI kit. I do need that. And what I want is my class, which has to be the same thing, movie table view cell. I want it to inherit from a UI table view cell itself. So UI table view cell is the type that I want this thing to inherit from. And what I want to add in here is the IB outlets, okay, and which is going to be a weak connection. And I'm going to add our title label, which is of type UI label, right? We also want to add in IB outlets, there we go, weak connection, which is our studio label, right? Which is our label, which is of type UI label. And we also want to add IB outlets, which is also our rating label, which is also of type UI label. Okay, so those are the things that we want. Okay, so that's our movie label itself. This is a lot, and I think we should put this up on GitHub. So at the top, we can certainly go and and do that, try and do that here, I prefer honestly not to use iOS's, Xcode's version control system. I'd rather use a terminal. I mean, I honestly think it's just better. And I'm just going to go back out to our main view here. So I'm going to go CD space and drag and drop this MDEV1004 M2024 ISIS, drag it in, and then, you know, kind of do a git add dot git commit -m. We'll say added project files for in-class exercise 7 iOS, which is kind of the first part we did there. And then I'm going to push that out to our project. Okay, now I can't add all of them right now. And the reason why I can't add all of them is because unfortunately we're using the project. And so there's pieces that are missing. Notice that this is still showing this. If I did a git status, it's going to show stuff that is, I can't modify, right? Because notice it says i7 iOS Xcode project. I'm still modifying this right now, and I don't want to do anything. I'm going to do it later where I put everything up finally for you guys so you can download my project and you can check it out. Okay. All right, so that is definitely something that we start with, and we've got these, but we haven't connected these at all in any way to our user interface. So let's go back to that user interface that we just made. So here's you know, kind of a main storyboard. And we've got a couple things to do. So if I kind of open this up again and I look at our table view cell, which is what I want to click on the right, we definitely see that a custom table view cell is what we're going to use. But there's another tab here that we can signify that we want to tell Xcode which class is going to be used for this custom table view cell. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull down that class, and you can see that movie table view cell comes up, and the only one that'll come up is one of type UI table view cell, the one that we've inherited from. So here I'm just going to click that, and you can see now that we've configured our user interface that the movie table view cell itself is showing here, as opposed to just a random UI table view cell, right? And so this is there, and we have a connection, but we don't have our connection to those objects yet. So what I like to do is, let's close this off now, and let's open up another view. And with this view, what I want to do is I want to look at the movie table view cell on this side, and on this side I want to have access to look at the this part. I want to kind of zoom in here, right? Because I want to zoom into this part here. I want to make connections. I want to connect these things, right? So what I want to do is, there's two ways to do that. You can do it from here or from here. Let's try it from here first. So if I kind of just drag over, and you can see that the title label, I can kind of drag over the title, right? And one thing that I can see that I did wrong is because I only give it enough room for title, right? I have to expand this so it kind of takes up the entire area, or else it won't work, right? Also notice how it crosses over with Studio. So this is kind of a bad thing. But let's just start with this first. Okay, so there's my title. I made a connection. And then we can also do the same thing with Studio. There we go. So we've made a connection here. You can see that those are connected. And then the last one would be our rating, right? So I'll kind of do that and just drag and drop that over here. So I've made the connections here so that our custom table view cell is good and connected to everything else we have. Wonderful. This is a good thing that we've done. All right. So now we can certainly close this off. We don't need this view anymore. And let's back out. But we do, you know, now that I've looked at this again, you know, as an example, and I'm looking at title, I think that we probably make title all the way big like this, just to kind of house, you know, the entire title. Same thing with Studio. Probably won't need to go that far, but I'm doing it anyway. There we are. And I'm just going to zoom in here so you can see what I'm talking about here, right? So again, just looking. And the reason why I did that is because it wasn't long enough. Like, what if my title, you know, is here and this crosses over with this one? We'll see how this looks. I may have to move Studio down a little bit, you know, because that's something I may have to do. The other thing is the content view. Notice the content view is hugging these two things, right? There's not a lot of control for this. It's not like I have total control over the size of my content view. It'd be nice if I can pull this bigger. I cannot, okay? Just things to know about a table view cell. All right, so very good. I have my connections. The next thing that I want to do is I want to rename my my view controllers. Right now, my view controller is just a view controller. That's kind of ugly. I want to rename this thing. So, again, the way to do this, if I click once and kind of click again, I can rename this as a movie view controller. So movie view controller. If I rename it this way, I need to rename it this way. I can also rename this, and if I can refactor rename, I can also rename this to movie view controller, movie view controller. And I want to do that for a bunch of different reasons, right? One is it's more descriptive, right, than what we had before. I'm just going to align some of these curly braces so that they look like how I like. There we go. And let's get rid of some of these comments right now. We don't need them. So this is kind of the first step. But if we rename it, sometimes our main storyboard loses the connection. So remember that if I click on here, and if I go to here, this is important. The class, if you didn't rename it like by refactoring, it'll say view controller in here, and then we won't be able to start this. So now that I've renamed it, I just wanted to test it to make sure that it still starts. So build succeeded, and you can see that I still get favorite movies, but nothing in here. Yay, awesome. So that's the next part. And the movie view controllers, where all the work is going to be. But before we start, doing that, what I also want to do is create our movie model. Movie model is important, right? Because without a movie model, can't really match up with the stuff that we want. So I'm just going to right-click here again, and I'm going to do a new file. And we want to have a Swift file, and we're going to call this, class movie, right? So click next, and I'm going to call this movie.swift. Here it is. And I don't need anything for this one. And instead of making it a class, because really all this is a model, I can use a struct instead of a class. So again, structs do exist. So I can say struct, and I can call this movie, and I'm going to make it codable. And what this allows us to do is use it when it comes to, we're going to use our movie with respect to how we're going to be able to fetch stuff from our API. So we're going to say let underscore ID is a string. Okay, we're going to do that. We're also going to let movie ID also is a string. We're also going to let title also be a string, right? Movie ID, here's something. If we don't have this as an optional, it'll require that we have movie ID, right? And we're not going to always have movie ID because we're not creating that right now. We're just getting some parts, but not the whole thing. So here's our title. We also want to have our studio. So that's another one. That's also a string. We're going to make title and studio and rating, critics rating, required. Okay, we're going to do that. The rest, not so important. What else is there? Genre, which is an array of strings. That's what that is. Also optional. We're also going to say that directors is also an array of string. That's optional. And writers is an array of string. That's optional. And what else is there? Year, which is, I believe, an integer. And also length, we'll make that an integer. And a short description, which is a string, we'll make that optional. All these are optional. And MPA rating, which is like, is it restricted? Is it, a rating G or whatever? That'll be optional. And finally, critics rating. That will be a double. And we're going to make it optional as well. And I'll talk about why. Even though we need it, the two things I want is studio and title. What if I don't have a mechanism to add in the rating, right? I want to be able to make it so that, it's not going to crap out. Because if I get something that's required here, and if I don't get a piece of data, iOS won't allow it. It'll be like, you're asking me to fill this model up, and I don't have the data for this model. It's empty, right? So I don't want that to happen. So that's our movie model, and that's pretty good. Let's put this up on GitHub. So we added that in. So we're going to say clear. And if we do a git status, we're going to see that these are all the things we've changed. Git add dots, git commit -m. We'll say added movie model, and we'll say it's a struct. Git push. There we go. And so now we pushed everything to GitHub. Awesome. That's pretty good. So this is kind of our beginning. Without a movie model, we really don't have a lot of control over anything that we do here and show in, on the interface. The next step is us kind of copy pasting some of the stuff that we got in from our PowerPoint, right, into our movie view controller. So movie view controller, here it is. And we want to make some things happen. I want to make a reference to the table view, all right? And we also, in order for us to do that, we have to encode our movie view controller so that it inherits from UI view controller, and it implements both the UI table view delegate and data source. We need to do that. So again, let's implement that. So we're going to say UI table view delegate, and then UI table view data source. We're going to put those two things in there. Now, the reason why it's giving me an error is because we don't have the required default, kind of things. And it says type moving control does not conform to the protocol. It says add stubs for conformance. Let's do that. So it adds those two stubs, which are these two things, right? I'm just going to take those. I'm going to kind of cut that out and put it here. There we go. So these are the stubs. So these are required. We must override these. Must override these functions. So it allows us to do. We must do that. We don't have any code here. We will have code here for the table view because this is going to be controlling our table view cell. We also need at the top some kind of reference for the an outlet. So we'll say IB outlet. We're going to say that, which is a weak connection to a, we're going to call this table view, which is of type UI table view. And we need to make that connection now. Let's do that before we forget. So I'm just going to, I can do the same thing as I did last time, right? Where I did this. Or if I go back to the storyboard, I could choose our assistant editor, right? And then you can see that the assistant editor would do the same thing. I can just pull this so it connects with the table view itself. So that makes that kind of creates that connection. And then I can close the assistant editor. I couldn't do this for the other one because the assistant editor doesn't quite work. You have to kind of have your own editor open, and that's what I kind of did the other way because that custom table view cell was a little different. Okay, good. So back to our main movie view. We've made that connection now, and we have our view did load. Inside our view did load, we're going to do our little funky connection, but I want to start with our fetch movies that I want to kind of put in, our fetch movies. We could do some of this right now because we know we're going to return movies.count, right? And that's what we want. So movies is what we want to have. So movies.count is what we want in there. We don't have movies, and so we really need some kind of variable that houses a list of all of our movies, at least in memory. So again, here, var movies is of type movie. We can say that. So an array of movie, and we're going to instantiate it to have an empty array for now. So that's going to kind of return the number of movies that we have in here. And the other thing that we can also do is we can return our custom table view cell, which is kind of an important thing. Let's do that too. So we're going to say something like let cell, this is before all the other fetch information that we're doing. Let cell is equal to table view dot DQ reusable cell with identifier. All right, with identifier. We'll use the with identifier for this one. And the identifier that we're going to use is movie cell. We have to kind of do that on the interface. So we haven't done that yet. So movie cell. And then index path is what we want to use, which is index path. And we're going to cast this as a movie table view cell. So we're casting it as that custom table view cell that we just created. All right. So we haven't done the return yet. We're going to get there. But what we want to do is go back to main storyboard, and movie table view cell is, or sorry, we called it movie cell, is this piece, right? So again, if I go back, we need to identify it. Otherwise, if there's no identifier, right? So there's different tabs here, you can see, right? So each of these tabs give you information, you know, that kind of stuff. Here's our class. So if I click on the table view cell itself, it gives us our class, you know, as an example. And there's custom, and there's this one, right? So these are all the things that we can see for this one. The other one we can do is the table view itself. So if I click on the table view itself and I go back to here, right? Again, if I skip back to all these things, we need to be able to identify the identifier. We have to set up the identifier, you know, the identity, if you will, for the custom table view cell, right? So here, prototype cells, we have one. We can kind of separate. We can have more than one prototype cell if we wanted, and all those kind of things. And you know, but what we really need is the identifier for that custom table view cell, right? So that's the identifier for you know, for this thing alone. So where do we put that? Is it here? Take a look at the movie identifier. So again, the movie view controller, if you look at it, all right, so there's a couple of identifiers here. So view controller, there's a title, right? We can actually put a title to it. We'll give it its own title. That's this little tab here, which if you hover over, show the attributes inspector. That's the title, right? And we do have this one, which is the class, the storyboard ID, and the restoration ID. Okay, so then it's got to be something like that. So view, right, gives us the restoration ID, the class. Safe area doesn't do that. Table view, right, it gives us the restoration ID and the class, the module. Then the table view cell, right, gives us the restoration ID and all that kind of stuff. And here's the identifier for this part. So where is it? Sudarshan, do you remember? We need to put an identifier for the custom table view cell, right? So where would it be in these little tabs? Because it's got to be somewhere.
Identifier.
Yeah, do you know what I'm saying? So we can't,
Yeah.
our custom table view cell, so this is the content view. Content view is definitely not where it's going to be, right? Because that doesn't really tell us anything. But then we need to put in our table view cell, right, our identifier, right? So that's like, if I kind of look at this, this is the main thing, right? It allows us to identify this, right? So here's our, you know, thing. So you see accessibility is identifier for accessibility. We can put that in there. But that would be movie cell, right? This is for accessibility, right? So that's what it's called. But it's not really what we want, right? It's with identifier is what we're looking for, right? So it's one of these tabs. So which one is it? It's not this one, right? Because this is kind of like on-demand resources. It's not this one. This is just information about my commits. This one is help. This one gives me the class, and this is the identity, and this is restoration ID, right? That's what that is. You know, could that be it? Localized hints, right? As an example, and this is accessibility is not even you know, done. It's like, I mean, if I put it here, if I said like movie cell, that's not right either, right? That's not where it belongs, right? And so where could it be? Like, you guys learned this, right? Should not?
Yes, Professor.
Yeah. So it's got to be somewhere in there. And if you don't put it in the right spot, again, then it's not going to show up properly, right? That's the problem. So, you know, so again, movie view controller, the scene itself, right? That doesn't tell me much. That tells me the storyboard ID for identity. That's and the restoration ID. Storyboard ID is, you know, kind of stuff, but we need this other ID, right? So it's not here, it's not here, it's not here, right? Where could it be? Here's the table, right? We have a restoration ID, and here's the movie table view cell. This is incorrect, I'll tell you right now. And then this is the label, if we want to have a specific label, and we also put it here, identifier, but does it belong here? You know, so you can see if as I go down, there's less and less options for what I'm doing. These are all specific things here. Title label, you can see the labels, what they look like here, and all that stuff. Favorite movies is the identifier for that one. And there's the first responder, exit, and the storyboard entry point, which is this little arrow right here. So that is the stuff that we're looking at. Okay, and then if I click on the next one, right, so this tells me the title of the view controller and the activity name if I want to touch that. And then if I just zoom down here, you can see that there's also a tag for the view if I want to add a tag for a specific view. The table view, you can see that I have prototype cells. That's the second one, second row that I'm looking at here. And there's also this, right? And there's the tag and all this stuff. And there, right here, my friends, is the reuse identifier. The reuse identifier, which is movie cell. Okay, so you can see that, and just stepping through it, there's where it is. Okay, and without this, even if I did all that stuff, like this stuff, which I did here, this stuff, and this stuff, it doesn't really matter. It's this right here where it belongs, the identifier. And that's on the movie cell itself. So if I go back to movie view controller, you can see that now movie cell, this is the identifier with identifier for the index path. And then we're casting it here as a movie table view cell. Next part, now that we've cast it, and I'm just gonna kind of make it so it's mine here. Now that we've cast it, I think we're doing okay with time so far. We're gonna run out of time if we go this slow though. We got movies, but what we want to do here is we want a movie, an individual movie. We'll say let movie equals to the movies, right? The movies itself at the index path. So at index path. So wherever we are, that location in the list. And I want to say that dot row, right? So index path dot row. So that is the location of the current movie that we're looking at. Then what I want to do is cell dot title label and dot text is equal to movie dot title, right? And cell dot studio label. Notice that these are coming up. I can kind of select them because I've casted it as a movie table view cell. It has that structure, so I can pull it up. And that is equal to our movie dot studio. And then cell dot rating label dot text is equal to movie dot rating. Sorry, a non-MP rating, critics rating, which is what we want. So those are the three things we want to fill up. All right, so that's what we want to do. But we know that this can't be because critics rating is actually a double. What we want to do is we want to kind of do one of these where we want to interpolate. We want to interpolate the movie critics rating. All right, that's what we want to do. And we want to make it so that it's either this or it's going to be 0.0. That's what we're going to put in there. Okay, so that is going to handle this. It's going to interpolate this. We're going to inject it into a string, which is what we're doing because everything is on the view as a string. And then what we're going to also do is we're going to let the rating equal to a movie dot critics rating. So we're going to kind of capture that as well, just like we did movie. We also want to capture the rating itself. And then remember that color thing I talked about? I want to do this now. So I want to say if we're going to say rating, right? Okay, if we can assign rating, that's what we're saying here. Then if rating is greater than 7, right? If rating is greater than 7, then I want my cell and I want the rating label dot background color. I want to make that UI color dot green. There we go. And I want to make the cell rating label dot text color. Let's turn the text color to black when it's green. So UI color dot black. There we go. And that's if it is 7 greater than 7. So it's beyond 7, 7.1 or whatever it's going to be. What about if if rating is only greater than 5, right? Then we know that cell dot rating label dot background color is going to be equal to UI color. We want to make it kind of like a yellow color, I think, is the nice thing. And cell.rating_label.text color, that's going to be a UI color dot black as well. Okay, so those two things. So, okay. And what about else if it's not one of those? If it's not one of those, so if it's not greater than 5 or greater than 7, we're going to say cell.rating_label.background color is going to be equal to a UI color dot red. There we go. And cell.rating_label.text color, let's make that white. It's going to be a UI color dot white. And so what we can do there is we can switch out the colors as we go, as an example, depending if the number, what the rating number is that we get, okay? But what if there's no rating? Somehow we might get a value that there's no rating. What do we do there if there's no rating? We can say that cell.rating_label.background color, let's make that gray. We'll say UI color dot gray, and we'll say cell.rating_label.text color is going to be a UI color dot white, so white on gray, pretty good. And we'll also change what the rating label says. So we'll say that the text itself will just be an A. So why am I doing this? Because what if I'm entering data and the user didn't enter a rating, right? Then I'm going to have like it's going to fail, right? So we don't want that to happen. And then after all this, and before we stop the function, we're going to return the cell. And that kind of takes care of that big part, right? Because we want to return the cell. Did I do it in the right spot? I think I did. So that is your table view, the two overrided functions that are required. They have to be there, okay? And so we've that's our first kick at the can. We don't have any data right now, but we want to fetch the data now. And this is the next part of what we want to do. So the first part is, kind of getting that part done. And now we have our stuff from our PowerPoint. And I'm just going to pull up that PowerPoint for a second. So here it is. And I have a couple of piece parts. One part is this function display error message. I'm just going to grab this. I'm going to copy it, and I'm just going to pull it off. I'm going to kind of switch back and forth now between the two. So let's go back to the Mac. And what I want to do is I want to put this, let's say, above the required function. So kind of up here. And I'm going to right-click and paste. So that this function here, this display error message, like I talked about, is going to pop up an error message if there's an issue. That's what it's going to do for us. Okay? So that's that one part of the PowerPoint. The other part of the PowerPoint is the function itself, the function that allows us to read from our data, right? Let's close this podcast thing. I don't know why that's open. And let's go back to that PowerPoint for that. So that is the fetch movies function, which is this one. So I'm going to grab that fetch movies function, this one for the most part, copy it. Again, this is in the PowerPoint. To save us time, I've just put it there. And I'm just going to paste that in, right? So there. So this is the actual function itself. This is the function for the fetch movies function. So the main function. Okay. Now, one thing we have to change is this. This is incorrect, right? Because this API call is a URL string that we need, right? And this has to match our stuff on render.com, right? So let's go back to let's exit full screen here for a second. I'm just going to exit full screen. And we had render right here. This is the list. This is the main thing right here, API. And then movie list is what we want, right? So the main thing is we're only going to handle movies here. So I'm going to grab all of this. This is going to be our base URL, because list is going to be something unique. So I'm going to copy this and then go back to here. And again, what we want to do is we want to make sure that this, right, is going to be correct. So this here is going to paste that in. And so now that is our link for, this will be different for you, right? You'll have to change this so it shows yours, not mine, okay? But this is the link that I would have for the movie list for where I'm going to go. I'm going to read the movie list. I'm not going to read the list because there'll be different things I can do, but that is our base URL. And we have our completion closure here, right? And now this is our response that I wrote, but I'm going to change this up a little bit because I know that the response, this is the response part. The response is going to be slightly different than this. All right, that was our basic. So I want to kind of define our JSON. So JSON is going to be there. And I want to say try JSON serialization. And JSON serialization, I want to create a JSON object. I'll say with data and options. So the data is going to be data. And the options that I want are going to be empty, like so. And I want to cast this as a string, right, of type any. So this is what this is going to do for us is it's going to take the JSON data from, you know, again, I'm going to read the data from this data right here that's coming in, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and deserialize it. I'm going to take it and try and convert it into something that I can use. So that's the first part. Now we know that we have a bit of a challenge. We have a couple of parts, right? We have if let success, right? If success is true, where my JSON data is, we're looking at the success objects. What this is using is JSON itself has an attribute called success. That's what I'm saying here, right? And I want to cast this as a bool, right? If success is equal to true, right? If that's true, then what do I want to do? I want to do something. If the success is false, there's no need reading it because it's false. Something went wrong, you know, with my API. I can't access it or whatever, right? So then I can say something, okay, well, if let movies data, we'll say movies data, and we'll say that that is equal to JSON, right? And again, we're going to look at another thing called data. That's the data part of the movie part. Remember, there's success, data, message, and a bunch of other stuff. If this is as, and again, what we want to do is as a string array, right, of type any, right? That's what we want. And the reason why we have to put it this way is because remember that it's not just you know, kind of a string. It's a string of objects, right? That's what it is, right? And that's what we're getting back. If that's true, then let movies equal to, let's try and JSON serialization again. And I want to serialize the data with the JSON object and options, this one, where the JSON object here is the movies data, the movies data itself, and the options are empty. I find that this works a lot more. So I'm kind of decoding the data that I'm getting, right? The next one is I want to get decoded, we'll call this decoded movies. I'm breaking this down a little bit, where I want to try and use the JSON decoder this time. And the JSON decoder is I'm going to decode the movie.self, so the one I just got, from movies. So why am I doing this? What this basically does is it says, okay, the movie itself is the movie model, right? That's this part, the movie model itself, right? It's a movie that we defined earlier, movie, the struct, right? And what I'm saying is I want to decode movies, the movies array that I'm going to get. I'm going to deserialize from the movie data. I'm going to take those movies and decode them, and they're going to be structured like a movie. That's what I'm basically saying here, okay? And then and only then do I want to send back a completion, right, which is the decoded movies and nil. Remember, there's two parts, movie and error, right? This is where I'm going to actually do it properly. And so this part right here, I'm going to remove in a second, okay, because I'm kind of rewriting it a little bit. All right, this is if let movie data JSON, if everything goes well and all that kind of stuff, that's good. And this is, we have success, okay, if everything goes well. What if this is, if there's not success? What if this is wrong, if it fails, right? Well, I want to print something like, I don't know, missing data. We'll print that out for us. And in JSON response, we don't have the data field, and the completion will be nil. Okay, so we're going to say no data, you know, and that kind of stuff. Okay, so that's if. Now there's also the else part. Okay, so let's do the else. And the else part looks like this. Let's say print API request unsuccessful. And this can happen when a bunch of things can happen, right? Where lots of stuff can happen. I'm going to say the error message, where the error message is JSON, and there's the message part. I'm using that message, right? And then as a string or unknown error, worst case scenario. Right? If I don't get a string back somehow, I want to say unknown error. Let error equal to NS error. So this is a next step error where I'm using the domain as a string and the code as 0. I actually wanted to use the other one. The user info as the, I'm actually out of bounds here. The user info, there we are, as a NS localized description key, which is the error message. Okay, and that should close that off. Okay, so that is the error that I want. And then the completion for this one will be nil error. Whatever that error is, I want to pass that back. Okay, so that is the else part, right? And then I can remove this part because this part was the stuff that we had before, which wasn't quite correct, right? That was only for the stuff that I had. Now, did I miss anything here? Cannot find error message in scope. Error message. Oh, we called it error message lowercase. That's why I made a mistake. We'll do this one, and that'll be good. All right, so that is my fetch movies function now. It looks pretty good, I think. Just copy pasted it from everything else that I had before. And one last part now is the fetch movies call, right? And I got that typically, right? I'm going to do that inside my view did load. So when I view my view did load for the first time, then that's where I'm going to do the fetch movies call, all right in here. So again, going back to my PowerPoint slide deck, I'm going to go to the fetch movies call. This is the fetch movies call. I'm going to grab this part, right? Copy it, go back here and paste it in. There we go. And that, my friends, is going to call movies. This is the movies. Going to pass this into this movies array, right? And then I'm going to have the error do all this kind of stuff. Dispatch queue is using an asynchronous coroutine. That's what it does. So that way, what it does is it creates its own thread for the movies. I'm just going to check here if everything is good. If movie is empty, no movies available. Movies, table view is reload data. We're going to do that. I think everything else here for my notes looks pretty much good. I think we're good. The only thing that I think that I'd like to add in that I haven't is some more output for us to do some troubleshooting. So where I do a guard let up here, I think I want to put in some print statements, which is something like URL error. That would be where that is. And over here, I want to print out another error that we're going to have, this might be a network error, I think. And down here, what kind of error would I get here? Oops, I jumped too far. Down here in this part of the guardlet, I'm going to put in a, print, this is an empty response, empty response. Like what if happens if I get an empty response? So these are the options, right? So if I don't have any data, this what means I don't get any data. What happens if I don't get any data? You know, that's the empty response, right? All right, so this is my code, but I haven't tested it yet. And then after this, we'll take a short break and get right into doing the Android version, right? And I'll try and do my best to finish it. It can be challenging, okay? And I'm telling you it's challenging because there's lots of little moving parts for the Android part. But we'll do our best. Okay, so let's run this thing and see if it doesn't blow up. Oh, and it will blow up because guess why it's going to blow up? Well, let's take a look. If we have any errors, it will time out, right? Because we're trying to get things, but guess what? Guess what? This is turned off, right? See how this is like spinning now? Well, until this does, well, then our Mac is going to time out in a second because there's no data, right? So it's trying pretty hard to do its thing, but it's not going to work because there's no data to be had, right? So now it's not giving us any errors, which is kind of a funny thing too. I'm not happy with that. And let's see if it's not this. I'm just going to make sure that it's not, so the request should time out if it doesn't do it properly. Should time out. And I'll check my code if it doesn't work in a second. Let's replace that. Yeah. Did it work? All right, so that worked, but not getting any code. What's going on, right? So we can start tracing why it's not working, right? And there can be a number of reasons for this, right? So first, let's run it again. Make sure we build it. We should get some kind of errors, right? Because we're not getting anything here. And that tells me, and I'm kind of looking at the, debugging area here. Let's take a look here. And I'm going to pull this up here. Yeah, we're not getting anything, like nothing, right? Which is always troubling when I get this kind of stuff, right? If you don't get anything, it's bad. Well, let's try some stuff out. Let's when we get here, let's print out something. So we got here, and let's print something. So print hello. How about that? And let's run it. Right, because you can't see it. There it is. So it says message killed, and then what we want, there's hello. So we got to this part. So hello, everything worked. Okay. Next part. Let's see if we can get to the next part and see where I'm going with this stuff, right? So we got to this part. We called the fetch movies method, and we have movies in here. And again, I'm just check my notes here to make sure that I'm not too crazy. We've got the IV outlet working with the UI table view. That looks good. Let's see if we're actually getting any data. So did we get to any of these stuff? So let's say if we got the response. So did we get a response? So we'll say print response. We'll say success. And I get to this part, right? So, and this is important because again, what we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out why we're not getting anything. Yeah, so we got there. Look, we got success. So success is good. This is a good thing. So we got success. That means we got to this point, right? Okay, well, let's see if we can read the data, as an example that we got. So we know that the decoded movies is what we want to be able to see. Let's see, can we print out a list of the decoded movies? We'll say print. Can we do this? I don't think I can because the decoded movies is not a string, right? But let's try it out anyway and see what happens. And yes, we do. Look at that, right? So we actually got all this stuff, right? So we got genre, optional. We got all. So we're actually reading the data. We're fetching it fine. Okay, the fetch function is not the problem, and this is good, right? And it's good because we're not getting any data. We got to figure out where we're going wrong, right? Because that's something that's happening. So we're decoding everything good. So coded movies, we don't care about. That's fine. Okay, so we've got to this point. We know we're getting back the stuff. The completion handler is being returned. So we're returning decoded movies, this whole part here, back to the completion call, right? That's when that's happening. Calling resume, right? We've got our table view. I'm just going to check my table view again. Let's make sure that it's right. Movies count, cell, movie, and let rating. And this returning the cell. This is good. Yep. Okay. So let's do movies.count. Can we see our movies count? So print movies.count. Can we get to this part, right? So that'll give us see, look at this. So this is bad. We're not even getting here to the table view. Okay. I think I know what the problem is. Maybe you can see the problem too. What else could be the problem? Well, how about in the call? So we made the call, as an example, and here's the completion, and then we're not getting any movies available, right? And all that kind of stuff. We're going to say self movies is equal to movies. Self movies is this one, right? So let's see if we're actually seeing the movies. So let's do a print here, print self dot movies. I want to see that. Can I get to this part? So I'm getting the movies back, as an example. So let's try that again. And I'm thinking it's just the user interface that's the problem. Yes, we're getting it back. So that means it's not the data. The data is coming in, right? And this is good troubleshooting, right? So I'm showing you where the problem might be, right? Okay, so we know now 100% it's the user interface, 100%. So what could be the problem? Is it the IB outlet, right? That the IB outlet is, the UI table view. Is it that? Because that is the table view itself. The table view, as an example, without that, what happens is, if I'm going to scroll down to this part, right, you can see that at the bottom, right, where do we use that table view data? Well, it's right here. Here's table view, right? So table view, as an example, just going to make sure that I'm not crazy. Yeah, so here it is. So here is table view, DQ reusable cell with identifier movie cell, right? Did I do this wrong? That definitely will cause the issue. So let's go back there. Let's go and make sure that in my main storyboard, right, the movie cell itself has the identifier movie cell and it has to be right. There's the movie cell. Okay. What else could it be? Sudarshan, what do you think? We're getting data, right?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? It's not the data. It's not the data. It's like, because we're getting data. I'm not sure if you're following along at all or if you're not, right? But definitely a problem.
Yeah, we are getting data as professor, but I don't know why it's not popping out.
Well, okay, so we can try and do the connection again, right? So
Yeah.
let's do the connection a little bit differently. So go back to this, and let's do the top here. Let's get rid of our IB outlets. So so remember, the IB outlet is going to be shown here inside of this, right? So if I click on this, so there it is, table view. I'm going to break that connection. There's the referencing outlet. And what I can do is let's just save this for now, and then move that out. And I'll make the assistant come up. There we go. And then what I'll do is I'll get rid of this table view. It's called table view. And then I'll just drag and drop this one. I'll control drag from here to here. So we know that it's the table view. Table view, it's a weak outlet. So we know that is done right. We know this is right. And so we should always try it again. Replace. So again, we're just checking different things out to see what the problem might be. Because we're not getting any movies here, that doesn't mean anything. That means we're not sending anything to the spot. So okay. What else? What else could it be? We know that movie cell is using that part, right? So we know that movie cell. Okay, so there's a studio label, and you can see that it's connected to movie cell. All these things are connected to movie cell. We know that the movie cell, the movie Swift, is a struct that we're using for these things, and that we're using the movie table view cell. They're all connected, right? These are all connected to UI labels, right? We know that, all right, because these are the label connections to everything. Okay, so it's something dumb. That's what I'm thinking, because that's why it's not going. So I'm going to take a short break, and when I come back, we'll have it fixed.